you coming in. Thank you for putting your cities and where you're at in the question and answer box. So I will start with just giving you a shout out. And so let's start at the top. You know, Lori, I saw the name of your town there and I was like, okay, wait a second. I don't think I can pronounce that, but I know it's Nebraska. So welcome, Lori. We have Stephen in Scotland. Thank you for joining us. Suzanne, Minnesota. St. Paul, Minnesota. Thank you for joining us. And we see you, Margaret, in Massachusetts. Dana, yep, you're hunkered down in Napa Valley. And Carol in Illinois. Jay over there in Phoenix. My parents live there, so I know the heat is getting turned up over there. Jack, hi. Thank you for joining us from New Jersey. And we see Houston, Texas, Santiago, Chile, Frankfurt, Germany, Mexico in the house, Saudi Arabia in the house, South Africa. So from all over the world, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started here, I want to move to our social media slide, and I want to really encourage all of you to engage with us on social media. We want to hear from you. You know, what's happening now? How has your world changed? And definitely share any interesting tips with your network along the way. Today, we are recording this webinar, and so all of you will receive an email with the link to the recording. And I just want to make sure to point out again that put your questions in that Q&A box right there at the bottom, and we will be taking some questions and answering them throughout the webinar today. Okay, so here's something I want to make sure that you stick around. And the reason is that we're going to be sharing some information and a special offer that will help you and your colleagues as we all rebound from the pandemic. So make sure you stick around. We have some exciting news to share with you. All right, so let's switch gears here and talk about our webinar. And today we're diving into building trust and demonstrating empathy. When I saw the title and the slides and the content, I was really excited because this content is so timely and it's something that unites all of us. So everyone, as we move through COVID-19 today. We do have Julie Thomas, our president and CEO, and as I call her, resident master of all things value selling. So Julie, it's all you.
Well, thank you to the other Julie on our team here. I'm so glad that you're all able to join us today. It has certainly been a crazy couple of weeks. Our last webinar was in March, and we talked a lot about prospecting, filling the funnel, some tips and techniques from that. And one of the things that we talked about in that was how we can start to use stories. And we said, stay tuned for May, because we're going to really talk about stories. So the whole objective today is how we can better engage executives in a high-level conversation, and how we set ourselves up for success when we're engaging any executive at any point in the sales cycle, and how we can become better at that. And the foundation of what we're going to talk about today is what we call value-based stories. There's many applications of these value-based stories, and we're going to give you a formula for creating these stories that I think you'll be able to take and put to work for you and put in your own repertoire of skills and tactics right away. But the formula is really critical, because it's all about how we're going to captivate and kind of create this create interest and create engagement. How do we get those executives to lean into us, to want to learn more, to want to have a conversation with us? And because without a conversation, sales is likely not going to happen for most of us in selling the types of products and services and solutions that we sell. And then talk a little bit about what we can do to deliver those stories. So with confidence, and it's all about execution. So once we have the formula, we're going to talk about practice and building our confidence and execution. Storytelling is an art. You can Google storytelling, and there's classes on it, and there's a skill to it, and there's an arc to the story. And we're going to talk a lot about how we can create those and what that starts to look like. I will let you know, as Julie said, we do have a really fun offer at the end of today. So stick with us to the end. If you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A here. We'll keep our eyes peeled for questions and make sure that we are adding as much value to you during this time that we have together as we can. So let me ask a question real quick. And the question is this. What percentage of sales meetings do executive buyers consider to be valuable? What do you think? I don't have an actual poll set up here, but just type in the Q&A. What do you think the answer is? What percentage, based on research, do executives think sales reps are adding value to them in a meeting? See all kinds of answers coming in here. 10, 5, 5, 20, 19, 40, 10, all kinds. We don't have a lot of confidence that we're adding value, that executives think it's low. I don't see anybody really thinking that it's above 50%. So the answer is really 19%. Based on a study done by Serious Decisions about a year ago, they interviewed and polled executive buyers and said, hey, when you meet with a sales rep, how many of those meetings do you think are valuable? And the answer was 19%, 1 in 5, which is kind of staggering, kind of disappointing, and very frustrating for us. If 20% of the time we are not adding value to the people that we're talking to, that by definition means that we are ineffective. So what can we do to flip that around? And as a result of that, what has happened? Well, executives protect themselves. It's harder and harder to get in. We know that today. We know that it is harder to get someone's attention. It is harder to get that first meeting for a number of reasons. Number one, because sometimes our messaging is not compelling and there's no reason for them to think that they should meet with us. Or maybe it's because we don't know what to say when we get there and they don't want us to waste their time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we can do to get those first meetings, to establish that credibility. Because the reality is, and we all know this, you all know this, prospects invest their time before they invest their money. And the whole concept of selling is, how do we get people to invest time with us so that we can understand the value we can bring to them and they can buy into our vision of that value and be compelled to take action and motivated to do business with us. They spend their time before they spend their money. So what happens when we're trying to get in front of an executive? Well, the reality is this is what is running through the subconscious of any executive when we're reaching out to them. Who are you? What do you do? I've never heard of you. We don't have a relationship. I don't know why I would want to meet with you. And we have to overcome that quickly and establish ourselves as credibility. So the foundation of getting and gaining executive access is to position ourselves as executives. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about 3 key ways that we can start to position ourselves as executives and be credible and valuable with the people that we're talking on. First is we need to show them that we know them. People don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. And we need to understand their world and their business And we need to adapt to them, not expect them to adapt to us. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. That is the foundation of credibility. That is the foundation of empathy, and that is the foundation of being trustworthy. And we'll dive into what those three things mean in a little bit more in a second. We're going to talk about this value-based story, and value-based stories are a great way to demonstrate the why somebody might be interested in doing business with you. And it's very different than an elevator pitch. Early on in my career, I was taught, hey, you've got to master this elevator pitch. What's an elevator pitch? Well, if you were stuck in an elevator with your target buyer and you'd never met them before, and you had 30 to 45 seconds, up to a minute or so, in that elevator ride to describe what you could do, could you tell them what you do and what your company does in a compelling way in that elevator ride? And it's a very interesting exercise that many of us have gone through. Many of us still go through that. But the interesting thing with the elevator pitch is it's always been about the what we do, not the why you would care. And so we're going to flip that up a little bit into this, what we call value-based stories. And then we're going to talk about practice. Just because I know what to say doesn't mean that I say it skilled and it rolls off my tongue seamlessly and it's compelling and it's interesting and engaging. And that's where practice comes in, and building our confidence from in these stories. So we talked about what our objective is. We want to build trust and be credible with our clients. Empathy is probably one of the hottest buzzwords I'm seeing right now in sales. Every analyst out there is talking about, do you teach quote unquote empathy? Does your methodology develop empathy as a skill set? Can you demonstrate empathy? Well, what is empathy? Empathy is your ability to understand and put yourself in the shoes of the other person that you are talking to or in a communication with. It's different than sympathy. Sympathy is I have pity. I can understand your feeling, and I can be sad with you if you're going through something sad. Empathy is really a little bit more cognitive and situational, in that it may very well involve some sympathy, and it may very well involve that type of emotional matching, but it goes beyond that. It goes into really understanding the situation, the world, the frustration, the feelings, the challenges, the objectives of the people that we're talking to. And the only way we can do that is demonstrate empathy is if we really understand the people that we're talking to. Do we know their role? Do we know what their companies do? Do we understand the industry that they are operating in? Do we understand the dynamics of the outside environment that we can bring? And all of that comes through in our first impressions. We know that when we have these meetings, we want to be perceived as experienced. We want to be knowledgeable. We want to be respectful of their time. All of these things are what the first impression that we hope to bring in any executive meeting that we have. And the way we do that is through demonstrating this empathy. So how do we start to create empathy? Well, one of the things that we need to do is we need to do research. And we're going to talk about, we have talked about in the past, different ways to do research and how you understand that. And as we create these stories, we want those stories to be relevant to the target buyer. So we'll talk about this template for these stories and the arc of these stories in the context of who you're calling on. I have probably a dozen different stories in my back pocket that I use in different situations. I've got a story for a small to mid-sized business with only an inside sales team. I have a story for a global multinational with multiple channels if I'm targeting somebody in that situation. I have a story that I would share with a sales enablement person who's implementing and executing on the process and the strategies of the sales leadership in that company. I've got sales stories for companies that have only major accounts, account-based marketing strategies. And one of those stories won't, it's not like one of those stories is the panacea for any single company. I need to do my research, understand the buyer that I'm talking to, and then pull out the appropriate story for those persons. So we're going to talk about that. Then the whole concept of stories. Stories are more memorable than facts and figures. So telling somebody that here's what I can do is less impactful than telling somebody what I have done and how that looked and what that impact looks like. And then again, we've talked about practicing. Top reps spend more time prepping and getting ready to execute than people that wing it. So we'll talk about that as well. So let's dive into some of this research. What do we need to know to tell the stories? And let me pause right there because I do see a couple questions here. And let me address one of those. First of all, how long did it take me to build up that library of 12 to 15 stories? The answer is I'm not sure I have a tried and true exact amount of time. I build them over time based on what I know my company is doing. So every success story that my marketing department has put out, I can take those success stories and turn those into 30-second little chunks of stories. So if we have a success story about a company in a specific industry or about a specific sales organization or a specific set of challenges facing that organization, I've got all of those in my back pocket. And then every time I bring on a new client, I also have the ability to turn that client situation into a story that I can use with similar types of companies in similar either industries or similar organizations. So it didn't take terribly long, but you do have to have kind of a foundation of companies that you've worked with from that perspective. So let's get into this. What do we need to do? Well, there's all kinds of ways to research our clients, but we need to get skilled at being able to show them that we know them. We need to know enough about them to be dangerous. And so we need to know, what business are they in? What industry do they operate in? Who are their customers? What is their go-to-market strategies? What can we know about them? And then there's lots of different ways to gather that information. We can get that in local sites, business journals. If you sell into a specific territory or zip code, there's different ways that you can target businesses in that. You can do it obviously through their website, through social sites, through, well, we used to say physical networking, but now it's going to be a little more virtual, at least for the short term, networking events and conferences when those ramp back up. But there's lots of different ways that we can get some of that information so that we can start to create relevant stories for those individuals. The last thing we want to do is tell a story that doesn't resonate with the buyer and all of a sudden it's working against us. They're saying, well, that may work for a large company, but I'm a little company, or that may work for a little company, but I'm a large company, or that may work for a local company, but I'm international. You want to build up that arsenal of stories so that when you do your research, you can pick the most relevant story that will likely resonate with that individual that you're targeting. So now let's think about what that story is all about. And it's not about what we do. Nobody cares what we do. Nobody cares what our product is. What they care about is the impact that we can have them. So Simon Sinek wrote a great book years ago, and it says Start with Why, and it's all about companies and people knowing what their purpose is and their mission, and really understanding their why before they figure out their what. We need to really take that to heart as sales professionals as well, and start with the why. Nobody cares about the what until they understand the why they should care. So our stories and our template for these stories is all going to be focused on how we can go ahead and get to that why. And the why has got to be from the perspective of the buyer. What's their why? Why would they care? Why would they lean in and engage with you? Why would they spend their time with you in order to learn more so they can ultimately spend their money with you? And really thinking that through. So flipping that whole elevator pitch on its head and upending it. So we talk about these value-based stories and really what we want them to do. We want them to be credible, relevant, and establish the fact that we can be positioned as trustworthy, knowledgeable, professional, and that we have the experience to generate the results or the impact that we want to impact. So we're going to start to think about how we do that and the arc of these stories. And it's really about who are we calling on, because we need that right story for the right contact level, and really understanding who that individual is. And then really understanding what is going on in their world. And the arc of this story is all about, hey, what's going on in your business? What challenges do you have as a result of what's going on in your business? And what result might you be looking for in addressing those problems or challenges? And really building that out into our story. So our stories are really going to have those three elements for each contact. So who are we talking to? What's going on in your business? What are the problems that you're likely facing? And what is the impact or outcome that you're likely looking for? So how do we do that? Well, we've talked a lot about what makes a great story. A great story typically has a protagonist. It has a hero. It has a struggle. It has a resolution. Sometimes it has a lesson learned. And our stories are all going to have that same arc. The difference in our story is who's the hero. We're not going to be the hero in our own story. We're going to make the customer or the prospect the hero in the story. We're going to try to emanate and tell these stories in a way that they can start to see themselves as the hero. Their weapon, if you will, for that hero to overcome the challenge that they're doing is going to be us. So we're going to be the mechanism that lights up that hero and allows them to win or be successful in this story. But all stories have a hero. All good stories have a hero. All good stories have a lesson learned or an outcome. All good stories have characters in them, and we're going to kind of tell that story and try to create that in a way that makes our customer feel like the hero. And then we're going to start to deliver it so that they think we're credible. What do I want somebody to think when I tell them an introductory value-based story? I want them to think, wow, she gets me. Wow, she understands the situation that I'm in, and it's probably worth investing a little more time with her to learn more about that. So those are some of the things that we want to do. And we're going to really tell those stories in a way that we can focus on the value. The value, the impact, the result, the outcome is the key message in the story that we're going to tell. And we're going to use these stories to open our sales calls. Somebody doesn't know what I do. I'm not going to tell them what I do. I'm going to tell them why I do it with companies like them. I'm not going to tell them what the features and functions are out of my products right away. I'm going to tell them the why companies partner with us to realize the type of results that I can bring to them. That's really the message that I want them thinking about. I want them thinking about, wow, if I partnered with this company, I can improve my results by X. I can realize this type of an outcome. Once they get bought into that, we can get back into the what and the how. We do that later, but they don't care about the what and the how until they first understand the why. And that's really the point of this. So in value selling, we have a core tool that we use throughout every aspect of clients that we engage with, and it's called the value prompter. And we use this value prompter in many, many different areas. We use it to prepare for sales calls. We use it to identify gaps. We use it in team selling situations. We use it in product marketing and messaging. We use it across the board of the organization in helping understand what's going on in the customer's world. Well, the application that I'm talking about today is how do we use the value prompter to create these stories? This is the template that we're going to use to create the stories. And it's just another way that we can wrap ourselves around the value selling framework methodology and immerse our messaging and our execution around the simplicity of this value prompter. So what do I mean when I use this as a template? Well, I want to start to develop these stories. So somebody said, how many different stories do you have? I said, I've got about 12 to 15. I've gone through this process with those stories. And I first said, okay, who's my target? Am I trying to reach a sales enablement person, or am I meeting with a sales enablement person in a specific industry? What is the role of the individual? What is the, if you want to use a fancy marketing term, what is the persona of the target buyer that I'm trying to target? And then based on the industry in that role, can I predict what's the likely business issue based on what I know about that company? Are they in growth mode? Are they in trouble mode? Are they entering new industries? Are they rolling out new products? Can I predict what those business issues might be to those companies? And I start to fill these in different value prompters. If you've ever been in a class with me in value selling, this is something we do together, and we practice these stories in the class as an outcome to build this arsenal of stories for you. Then I say, okay, what are the typical problems? If I'm calling on a VP of sales, for example, in a specific industry, are they maybe having trouble with competitive alternatives? Is it difficult to differentiate and therefore their reps feel like they have to discount? Are they not accurately forecasting? I can identify some problems that a typical person in that role might have. And then I think through companies that I've partnered with in the past and that they've worked with us and said, what is the result or the measurable impact? So I can tell these stories in a couple of ways. I can start to create a story based on an actual client. Maybe I can share the client's name, maybe I can't, but it doesn't really matter. I can turn this into a story and that was an actual customer. I might say, for example, I recently worked with a company in XYZ industry. Here's the overall business objective they had, the problems they were facing, the impact they had, and tell the story that way. Or I can be predictive of, we typically work with companies like you and individuals in your role, Mr. VP of Marketing, who are faced with XYZ in your business. And some of the challenges that are surfacing on a daily basis include blah, A, B, and C. And the measurable outcomes in partnering with us include Y, and Z in the value side. Notice in these stories, I am saying nothing about what I do, what my product is, or anything. The only thing I'm saying is by partnering with me, by partnering with value selling, by aligning with us, by choosing to work with ValueSelling Associates, the impact they have. I am not giving them one iota of information about my products, my deliverables, my features, my capabilities, my website. Nobody cares. They want to know about their problems that could be solved with us and the impact that we can have. So I use the value prompter to start to sketch this out. And then I can start to turn this into the story. So for example, I can turn this into my 30-second credibility introduction. What do I mean by a credibility introduction? It's a way to open a call that establishes my credibility. So I might tell this story. I recently worked with a CRO who was in a company that had a SaaS solution. Their revenue goals were incredibly aggressive, and he thought that he was likely at risk to not achieving those revenue goals, and therefore had to look at doing some things differently. He identified a couple of his key challenges were they were losing on price, their pipeline was stalled out, and the pipeline that they had was unacceptable. It was insufficient to meet their goals. What they found in partnering with us was stalled sales were reduced, qualified pipeline grew, and he told us that it contributed to over $2 million in the first 6 months post value selling implementation. Great short story, compelling. I've got some great data, some great stats in there. I could also add on to that, and he was recognized as a leader and a change agent in his organization. I can touch on some of that personal outcome, not just the business outcome as well. But the whole idea is I can tell that story and then immediately transition to the person that I'm talking to and say, can we now spend a few minutes and learn about, and you can share with me a little bit about what's going on in your world and the potential challenges that you have to see if we may be able to bring similar value to you. So it's a fabulous way to kind of get their interest, get a hook, lean in, transition back to what our objective is, which is not to tell them, but to get them to tell us what's on their mind, get them to tell us what their problems and challenges might be and what that opportunity might look like for us. We need to create need for our capabilities before we tell them what our capabilities are. And that's the whole concept of value selling. For those of you that have been on these sessions or been in programs with us, you know that our fundamental premise is that selling is not telling. It is about asking deliberate, specific questions to create need and context for us to best educate and ultimately contextually position our products and services. And in order to contextually position our products and services, we need to know what their context is. And the story is a great way to open and then ultimately transition to that. So what does this mean? How do we do this? Well, we've got to build a whole arsenal of these stories. And I see a question here that I'm going to stop and address real quick. The first one is, usually when we use a value-based story, some customer says it's not relevant to them, even though I think it is very relevant. How do we avoid this? So first of all, the number one is we need to do our best job at doing our research to create the most relevant story that we have. If somebody said, well, Julie, that's interesting, but that doesn't have anything to do with anything that I'm worried about or isn't relevant to me, I would probably say, oh, really? And flip that over to another open-ended question and say, well, then can you tell me what is top of mind for your organization and what some of your top challenges are and what's going on in your business with that? I wouldn't, because there will be people that will just say no and it's not relevant just as a brush off. I would try to flip that around and see if I couldn't understand a little bit more. I might also lean on some of the research. Because if I've done my research, I might lean on that. Oh, I read this was a #1 issue for your company in the annual report on your website. I saw the press release, whatever that might be, and then flip it around and say, so if that is not the the current reality here, can you tell me what is the current reality? So I would turn that fact that it's not relevant into the very reason that I'd want them to engage. Another question here, what's the best way to go about finding quantitative data points when prospects lack visibility into that? Well, most organizations have some sort of value proposition. And the value proposition of any organization is their promise at a macro level to the potential impact you can have. So if you are in a pure startup mode or pure new mode and you don't have customers that have shared results with you, or you don't have customers that you know you have had a positive impact on yet, I would be using that value proposition, that macro promise, in a kind of a hypothetical story. So rather than kind of telling it as a company that you've already worked with, saying we are partnering with companies and here is the outcome that they expect to have. But I would also be looking to your marketing department to try to arm you with some of those facts and figures. Maybe you can cull them out of customer testimonials from that perspective. The story isn't the story is something that you're using to set the foundation. So it certainly has to have some honest foundation in it. We're not making things up here. We are telling stories that enhance our credibility, not position us as we're not telling the truth. But I would, if you don't have that data, I would use the value proposition perspective from that. And it starts to condition the buyer as well, that you want to focus on them, not you. So again, the key to these stories is nowhere are you telling them what you do. You're focusing on the value, the result, the outcome, which is the why they might do this. So how do we make this well? We want to make a good first impression. These stories, the foundation of these data, can be used in your prospecting outreach. They can be used to open sales calls. They can be used throughout the sales call. Let's face it, and even when we're engaged in a sales cycle, the exec we're calling on are busy. They're running from meeting to meeting to meeting. As a matter of fact, in the Zoom world that we're in today and the virtual world today, with people working at home, people are more scheduled now than they ever have been. Or at least that's a lot of what I'm seeing. It's back to back to back meetings, where maybe when you were in the office, you had a little more informal communication. You could get something handled in a quick 5-minute conversation while you're filling up your coffee cup or you're walking down the hall with somebody, where now you're scheduling a 30-minute call to do the same thing. So they're busy, they're coming into the meetings. Sometimes these stories can help us break their preoccupation, remind them of the value that we can bring them, and bring them back into the moment of our conversation. But at the end of the day, it is all about making that good impression every time we get the chance to speak with those execs. And these stories can be extremely powerful from that perspective. Here's a great stat that just kind of ties everything up for us as we kind of finish this, and that is that stories sell. And it's people love stories. People love stories internally. When, you know, I don't know about your companies, whenever we have a win here at Value Selling, everybody wants to know all the details. How did it happen? How'd you get in the door? What do they expect the result to be? How long did it take? Everybody wants to learn from the stories of our colleagues and our peers. Our customers also want to learn from the stories of the success that we've had from everybody else. So really thinking that through is critical, and having those stories. The why is more important than the what. And I probably sound like a broken record, and I apologize for that. But most salespeople that I talk want to get into the what. They want to get it. Let me tell you how bright my shiny object is. Let me just do a demo for you, because if you see a demo, Julie, you're going to love it. And you're just, the money's going to be jumping out of your wallet and into my hands. And so we can slow down and use these stories to focus on the why and create more when we get to the what. Not saying we're never going to get to the what, but when we do get to the what at the appropriate time, the what becomes much more powerful and so much more impactful, because now you're bringing to life the result that they expect. So stories sell, and they're really important here. And then we've got to practice and really focus on that. We cannot deliver these stories enough. The beauty is now we've got the technology. You've got your phone, you've got a camera, you've got a recording device. Practice them with your peers, share them with each other, develop the confidence. If you tell a story about phenomenal impact you've had with a customer and your voice is tentative and you are questioning, I think they got about a 20% uplift, might have been less. If you use a tentative tone of voice or a questioning point of view, you will not be building the confidence and the credibility that you hope to do. So one of my associates has talked about the, the kind of concept of confidence, and he says, Mike Tyson had the comment that says, Mike Tyson, the boxer, had said everybody has a plan and then they get punched in the face and they need plan B. So we want to be ready to deliver and be really confident in our delivery of these. And in virtual communications, the tone of our voice is important. The speed of how we deliver becomes really important, and it's really powerful. So I'm going to address a few more questions. I'd like you all to think about, okay, what can you do today to improve your empathy and build your credibility? And jot it down real quick on a note paper, because I'm going to give you a way to win a valuable prize as a result of that as we get into this. So as you think about this, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas that might make sense. Number one, find a recent win. Think about a good customer that you had, or client win that you've had, and start to map the details of their story onto a value prompter. Use the value prompter as that template. Who was involved? What was their role? Think about the industry. Who defined that buyer, if you will? What was going on in the business? What were the problems? And most importantly, what is the anticipated or the realized outcomes, results, and value that they got from that? And start to jot those down. If you are new in your role and you don't have a recent client win, when you talk to existing customers, ask these questions. Ask these questions of them. If you don't have existing customers, go to your own company website. Look at your success stories. Look at your testimonials. Look at the marketing content that your company has created for you, and take some of what is already there and map it to a value prompter. If you go to my website, I've got a whole bunch of customer testimonial success stories. I could map those to a value prompter, start to practice those stories myself. So if I'm new in this role or new to this company, I can create that arsenal of stories just from the published marketing content that we already have, and create those stories. Practice them, personalize them. Think about how you're going to transition from that story to learning more about that customer. The phrase that I use is, can we talk about what's going on in your world, in your company, in your department, in your situation, to see if we can bring similar value to you? And that is your first question that then you can launch into an open question. Tell me about it. What's going on? And then practice telling those stories. Practice them with your peers. Share them with your peers. It doesn't have to be your customer. If you've got a mentor in your organization who's been around the block a little bit longer than you, find their stories, steal them. We call that R&D in our organization. Rip off and duplicate. Use them and share what other people do. So that could be a great perspective. Again, we are focusing the prospect in trying to create the hook and get them to lean in, that we know their world. We know the problems they potentially have. We might not nail every single problem with the story, but we get them thinking about, maybe that's not exactly my problem, but this one is, and start to think about all that, which can be really, really powerful. So let's see if we've got a couple other questions. Another idea on research: double check with people who work with that person or are close to them. Absolutely. In your prep for an executive call, you may talk to your sponsor, your coach, your champion, and ask them, hey, what's top of mind? What will resonate with that individual? Another comment here: executives do expect us to understand their problems. If we want them, any executive, to think that our solution, whatever our solution is, whatever you sell, is the best, and we want to get agreement on that solution, doesn't it first make sense that we get agreement on the problems? We're not a solution in search of problems. We're a solution that is the perfect solution when these certain problems and issues exist. So let me, Julie Bragan, let me ask you, do we have any other questions that we want to address here that have come through?
Hey, Julie, I think let's see. I think Andre has one that I think might resonate with the group. For increasing empathy, what sources do you use to learn about a particular title's responsibilities, i.e., what are the issues a particular, like a vice president of finance might have?
Great question. So there's a couple of things I think you can look at. So number one of the things that I find really interesting is if I know I am calling on a vice president of finance, let's say in a manufacturing company, I might go to LinkedIn and look at a multitude of VPs of finance in that role for different companies, and sometimes competing companies, or in that manufacturing space. Often in the linked bio, they will tell you exactly what they do and what their key areas are. I might also look at the website of the company itself, because oftentimes there, where they've got governance, you'll be able to see exactly what that individual is. In some organizations, in some industries, there's industry sites that you can go and look at an industry site. So if I'm calling on, I don't know, trucking and logistics, I can find the industry trade publications or industry website that might have some of that information. So that would be some of the areas that I'd start to sleuth around.
Hey, Julie, I think while we have one more, I think it's a really good one for the group as well, and we'll make this our last one. And I just want to let everyone know that we will reach out to you. There's some questions about the value prompter, so we will answer those and email you separately. But here's one from Brian I think is really relevant. It says, with recent virtual meetings push and how we're all on Zoom, sometimes presenting work to multiple companies, do we address many by sharing multiple stories with the audience?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So a couple things. Number one, we have just published or recently published an ebook on virtual meetings. So if you haven't downloaded that, go to valueselling.com and download that ebook. There's all kinds of tips and tricks in that. If I have a group meeting, I probably would not tell, if there's 7 people on it, I wouldn't tell 7 different stories. I would try to open that call with a relevant story that I would hope that would resonate with all of them. So I might mash up a few. You know, so we recently worked with a company, or we're working with a company who had a team of executives or management or task force or whatever that group might call themselves, that were trying to address a set of challenges, and here those challenges were A, B, and C, and the impact by partnering with us included X, Y, and Z. So I might try to meld that persona to that team if you can, if you have that, as a way to open the call. Because again, the story is a great way to get everybody to kind of lean in and focus on the why and not the what. Awesome. Great. Well, I promised you that we had a special offer for you. So let me kind of dive into what this is. And there's two ways that you're going to be able to participate this. I am going to be part of a virtual sales summit that's going to happen the first week of June. I'm actually on a panel that'll be at 12:45 Eastern time on June 3rd. But I want to invite any of you to go to stopthesalesdrop.com and look at this virtual sales summit. I think it's going to be an excellent virtual event. Lots of great speakers, lots of great content, and 30 plus sessions to grow. If you attend this conference, you're also going to get a subscription for some value added content over time. So definitely take a peek at Stop the Sales Drop. If you are so inclined, you can register for that. The fee for the whole virtual event is $297, and with value 100, you'll get $100 off of that. But in addition to that, I have going to be giving away 2 free seats. So, and the way we decided to do this is to ask you to engage with us on our social platforms. So at the beginning, we asked you to do this, but if you post what you got out of today's webinar, or what you've gotten out of any webinar that we've attended this year on Twitter at valueselling.com, and the value does not have the E in it, or on LinkedIn, you'll see these posts. If you post on that, we will enter you into a raffle, and the raffle will be tomorrow morning at noon Pacific time, and we'll announce the winners in the follow-up to this webinar. So engage with us. You could win a free seat at the Stop the Sales Drop Summit the first week of June. You can attend, maybe one of your colleagues can, but it'll be a great event with great resources. And we look forward to your topics on that. And then just as always, today's session is being recorded. We will send you that follow-up. You can also go to valueselling.com, all kinds of resources on there, that virtual ebook. We've got a couple of recorded webinars earlier this year, one on prospecting, one on virtual sales calls, and some tips and tricks there. Please take advantage of the resources that we have. And then last but not least, if there's anything I can do to answer any further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly. Again, I'm Julie Thomas with Value Selling Associates. Thrilled to have you join us today. Hope to see you soon on our next webinar. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and good luck. Bye-bye.